Welcome back to the Ed Show. The Tea Party congressman from Florida, Alan West, has joined other Republicans in criticizing the Occupy Wall Street movement. But he's taken it a step further. West said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would not have supported it.
Martin Luther King Jr. would not have backed these type of protesters. First of all, Martin Luther King Jr. had a focus, he had a message, and he was divinely inspired. I don't know what the inspiration is for these individuals.
Congressman West, the inspiration and the message is pretty straightforward. It's a call for economic justice in America. In fact, in August of 1963, the Sunday before a march on Washington, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said this on NBC's Meet the Press.
We have waited for well now 345 years for our basic constitutional and God-given rights. And we still confront the fact that we are at the bottom of the economic ladder. We confront the fact that the gap between the medium income of Negroes and whites is widening every day.
I don't know, Congressman, does that sound familiar to you? The income gap between the working class and the wealthiest Americans is widening every day. That's why King's very own daughter, the Reverend Bernice King, said her father would have supported the 99% movement. He stood for both racial and economic justice. One part of the 99% movement has now formed a demands working group and called for a national convention. A list of suggested demands includes a jobs plan and single-payer health care. But the suggestions by the working group have not yet been embraced by the movement as a whole. Let's bring in the Director of Africana Studies and Associate Professor of English at Lehigh University, Dr. James Peterson. Dr. Peterson, good to have you with us. Doing fine. And I want your take on this. How do you think Dr. Martin Luther King would have seen the 99% movement? And why is it so important?
Well, it's clearly Dr. King would have embraced this movement, remember his principles of nonviolence, and remember that when he gave his life for the movement, he was focused on addressing poverty directly and marching nonviolently to Washington. I mean, that's when he got shot in Memphis, when he was working with the sanitation workers, this was his platform precisely. So I'm just disgusted by this in some ways, Ed, because Representative West, and I hope the people from the 22nd District in Florida can hear me on this, for a congressperson to have this kind of a nonsensical grasp on American history at this particular moment where we're commemorating the life and work of MLK is really disheartening and disappointing.
Well, he put it in the congressional record. He just didn't say it on a radio talk show with a righty. I mean, he went on the House floor and said this. Congressman West also connected Occupy Wall Street and the progressive movement to communism and socialism.
This progressive movement is really what communists were called back at the turn of the century, between the 19th and 20th century. So we're starting to really see the face of who liberal progressives are, being it Marxist, Stalinist type of policies, going back to, socialist type of policies.
Does this man have any credibility at all?
He just doesn't have a grasp on history. And again, he's politicizing things that he should not be politicizing. We should not politicize the legacy of MLK. He's sort of the juxtaposition of the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street is misguided. And it's set. He does this just to compete. He just wants to win. It's just about making political moves and political stratagem. 99% movement is one of the most important movements of my entire lifetime, where folk are actually standing up and standing in to try to get some economic justice in this country. At a time where the top 1% control more wealth and more land than they have since the 1920s, it is about time for the 99% to stand up and challenge that. That's what capitalism is about. You want to talk about socialism and communism. I mean, all of that kind of government sort of socialism has been directed towards the corporate sector. Yeah. So now we have people standing up, and you have politicians like this politicizing these movements and destroying sort of the legacy of MLK. It almost leaves me speechless, Ed. And I've been on a few times. I have a lot to say, but this story almost leaves me speechless.
What do you make of the Demands Working Group, this organization that they're focusing in on some things that they want, and they want to have a national convention? What do you make of this?
I feel like the organic nature of the Occupy Wall Street movement needs to be allowed to live and breathe as it is. The working group certainly should make recommendations, but I'm not going to be disappointed if the movement doesn't take on all those recommendations. We need to support the movement if you believe in what they're doing, give it direction and leadership if you believe in what they're doing. But the idea that a working group understands better than the people themselves is a misunderstanding of what this movement is.
Well, they're talking about a convention in July of 2012. They're talking about putting candidates in every district. And they say if they can't get it done in 12, they're going to go to 2014, 2016. Where does this leave the Democrats? Because if you look at some of the demands that they're talking about, it parallels that of the Democratic platform, the convention they just had back in Denver back in 2008. What about that?
Sure. I think the DNC should certainly be looking at Occupy Wall Street very, very closely. Obviously, the movement itself has been a little bit reticent about embracing politicians because sometimes politicians get to Washington and they forget about the movement. And so we need to have the convention should be more about how do we marry some of these movements together. There's lots of different progressive movements. How do we marry some of these together to make a really strong push to make real change in this country?
I'm going to ask Congressman West to come on this program and have a conversation with you, if I may, Dr. Peterson.
I'd love to debate the
have him on board and have the two of you exchange ideas.
Anytime, anywhere.
We will work on it.
Anywhere.
We'll work on it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.